Hello and welcome to episode 9 of my KSP NASA series. We're picking up where we left off and bringing back the Apollo 11 crew. Just a standard lunar return. I've done a couple of them now, so this is all running 4 times time acceleration. I thought about editing this one down, and as I go on these moon missions, unless something really interesting happens, they're going to get progressively edited down to just their more basic parts, because it's the same mission. I enjoy flying them, but I understand not many people probably enjoy watching the same mission getting done multiple times. I've got 6 more of these launches ahead of me, or 5 more of these launches ahead of me after this one, so it's quite a bit of messing about to get all that done. And this being the first lunar return, I thought I'd show the whole thing, not because particularly interesting, but just demonstrate that yes, the ships I built can do what they were designed for. I was running into some issues on like Apollo 10 and 8. Once I'd separate the pod, I'd get the alerts from TAC Life Support that all their life support assets had been drained, because resources drained from the top down, or are used from the top down in Kerbal Space Program, and so the pod there, being the top, ends up emptying out pretty fast. That was a piece of debris from a development test that a development article I launched, and it's in that weird limbo zone where it's on rails but still within the atmosphere. So unless something gets within physics range, or I select it and manually write it down, it's just going to keep orbiting there. And I had that 400-meter, half-kilometer encounter with my returning pod. Not really any danger of collision. That's probably one of those astronomical probability numbers that everybody loves so much. And because I hung on to that service module so much longer, I had extra mass and kept the velocity up. This capsule boosted back up out of the atmosphere before making its return, which is actually a lot like the real Apollo capsule did. They were designed to aerodynamically generate lift so that they would dig into the atmosphere and then pull themselves back out and then ride back down again. And that was to just kind of take the heat stress off that heat shield and reduce G-loads on the crew. If you brake a little bit in separate goes, it tends to be less stress on the heat shield. But this is most definitely a capture at this point. I was really glad I transferred in that life support, because I don't think I would have lost anybody, but better safe than sorry. Now, as I said, I'm going to edit these down the more I go, just because the more I do these, the more familiar they're going to become with everybody. And that way I can, in the series, I can get to things like Skylab and the shuttle program, and then eventually Venture Star and Constellation a lot sooner as far as video content goes. It's still going to take me the same amount of time in my time to fly them, but I can cut out a lot of stuff that's just unnecessary. Really not unnecessary, just boring logistic stuff. Really hitting that atmosphere again. .64-bit is still running pretty stable, so long as I don't poke it. I've been an idiot a couple times, updated mods and caused stability issues, but so long as I do a fresh install of the game and reinstall all my mods from scratch and then move my save file over, that's been fixing it. I'm just going to stop touching anything at this point and just play the dumb game I've got set up, because I'm really just asking for trouble on a certain level. A clean shoot deployment. And safe return for everybody. Everybody was awarded a bunch of medals. And this is why I do my 2-stage landers. this will be on the moon forever, or at least until I move on to another project. To kind of take a break from the Apollo mission, or actually bide time while we wait for enough time to pass to justify launching another one, I'm sending my first probe to Minmus. It's going to be a combination mapping / communication satellite, because with remote tech, it might kind of pay to have communications capability around other bodies. I don't wait with Minmus. I don't wait for the perfect transfers where it lines up with the ascending or descending node and I can just burn there. I just make a quick correction to change the eccentricity of the orbit on the way out. Do the circularization burn. And I've tried to be very careful with my staging. I'm trying to jettison all my upper stages where they'll fall back. Let's set my orbit up. Aim for Minmus. This is where I start messing with the normal, anti-normal adjustment knobs. The way to get to Minmus, if you don't want to wait for the ascending node, is to set your apoapse to the correct altitude, and then somewhere along the line set a course correction up or down. And this one I'm actually using the moon as a gravity assist. Not necessary, I just thought it'd be kind of neat to try and pull that off. And a little bit of more futzing with the maneuver nodes to try and get that encounter. Oh, had it. There we go. A 12 meters a second adjustment burn. We can definitely spare that. Which I have a habit, there's no particular reason for it, it's just personal preference for some reason, but I have a habit of just ignoring Minmus most of the time. I don't quite know why that is, but I just do it. Trying to set this orbit up so I can get a polar capture. A little massaging of the maneuver node. This is all 4 times time acceleration on top of whatever time warp I'm applying to run this through as fast as I can. But should give people a pretty good idea of how you can get to Minmus under non-ideal circumstances. For interplanetary transfers, I typically wait for the windows. I'm not going to burn 5,000 delta V to get out to Duna, because it's in the absolute worst position. I will wait, but so while that's doing that, we flip over to the boys on Apollo 12, and I tried to do this one completely IVA. It didn't work out. I'm gonna have to mess with action groups, and after nearly breaking the game trying to do an IVA transfer using crew manifest, I think an entire IVA view flight is going to be impossible for me. I'm going to have to switch out to an exterior view to transfer people between spacecraft. As far as actually flying the machines, I can most definitely do all that IVA, and including LEM capture and things like that. Finishing the transfer burn. Significantly cut down from the Apollo 11 launch. And cutting directly to the circularization burn. In this Apollo 12, I'm trying to follow the actual Apollo 12 mission profile, which had them, I believe, the I believe the probe they were sent to land near was called Explorer 3. I'm not entirely certain. It's been a while since I've looked it up. But the mission was to land next to a previously landed probe and recover parts so that long-term exposure to lunar conditions could be studied. And so I had that lunar lander probe out there, so I figured that would make as good a target as any. And it was off the equatorial plane and in a different biome from the Apollo 11 landing, so it all kind of worked out pretty well. Meaning I would finally be able to pick up that missing science that the probe was unable to transfer and pick up some parts from it. Trying to do a combination eyeball and instruments landing. And the thing about a landing in an incline with an orbital inclination, if you're trying to do the Kerbal equivalent of lunar orbit rendezvous, is that as the moon turns, you're going to become more and more out of phase with your orbiting command module, and so your return is going to be a little more tricky. It's going to take a little more orbital gymnastics to hit. It's not too difficult. Coming down 250 meters away was pretty good in my book. Especially for me, I've never been the best at precision landings. Just a little hop, skip, and a jump away. But at this stage, it's pretty familiar drill. Run all the science experiments that I've got on board. Have everybody pile out and plant the flag, do a surface sample, pick up all the science. And this is where I really appreciate having the Final Frontier mod. I can kind of keep track of which one of my Kerbals have been where and build up a mission appropriately. Bill Kerman is mission commander here. And in the Apollo program I'm running, I'm intending that the mission commander will always be the LEM landing pilot and also responsible for planting the flag, doing the EVA report, while whoever else is in the can has to do surface sample and science collection from the various instruments. That way I can have 2 Kerbals in more than one spot. And biome diversity on bodies in the moon, or pretty much in Kerbal Space Program, are so low that there's really, unless you can land right at a border zone between biomes, there's really not much point in ranging very far out. And I was looking at the biome map of the moon, and I really think I'm going to have to run all 6 missions, all 6 Apollo landings, unless I get really lucky and plant one down, like I said, right on a border zone. But I'll just kind of see how that goes, because I've tried hitting those borders before, and it's pretty difficult to get something within jetpack range. The ideal would be is if I could get right on the border and just walk around a bit, but I don't think that's going to happen. And with this LEM design I have, it's going to be really difficult to get a usable rover attached that they can drive out. So everybody activates their jetpacks and flies over to the previously landed probe. A little time acceleration there. And yes, everybody recognizes this ancient piece of hardware that was launched a full 2 Kerbal years ago. And the mission is to retrieve some parts from it. I thought about taking that big dish, but it really is the only communication link with Kerbin that this thing has. Doesn't have any fuel, so there's really not much point, but figure I'll take one of the communitrons instead. Still has another one on board, so it connects kind of a ground relay station. And we'll grab a solar panel for good measure. Fly on back to the lander. And this is where, this is the mission where a lot of my messing around with stuff was starting to cause problems. And it becomes especially apparent in the launch. Really be nice if I could learn how to fly a jetpack. But the plan was to take these parts and attach them to the outside of the lander can and then stick them somewhere on the return capsule that would be out of the airstream. However, I got so caught up trying to fix some glitches that I'd caused, I completely forgot about them until I'd already ditched the lander. So you basically, the whole point of the mission was screwed up on my part. And this is where trying to meet something in a different orbital plane gets a little tricky, but it's kind of cool if you pull it off. You can see that at that point the module's getting ahead of me, so I burn laterally, match my velocities up. And there, that user interface flicker is something I've caused by updating a mod. And at this point, it quit saving and loading. Kept trying to save and reload, and save and reload, and it wasn't happy with me. I spent probably 2 or 3 days trying to recover after this because I couldn't even go back to the Space Center there. Eventually, I did the full game file rebuild. I still had some issues. Well, this is before I did the rebuild, and you see everybody's when they go on EVA, their resources are all jacked. That was a little bit of knuckle biting there because I was pretty certain that I just destroyed the game, my whole game file right there. I was reluctant to exit at this point because I was afraid I'd never get it back, so I figured I'd at least finish the Apollo 12 flight. That flicker keeps coming back. Yeah, so it's a little nerve-wracking, and I really need to learn to just leave well enough alone. Kept trying to fix everything, and it just was not happy. So I was creating quick saves the whole way back, so maybe I could at least recover one of them. The persistent file was actually fairly well corrupted. I ended up having to do the return flight again once I got the game file rebuilt, but that wasn't too much of a big deal. Since I already had footage of the return, I didn't bother shooting it again, because they came down almost in exactly the same spot. I think we got a little further past these mountains on the second go. But I set my periaps a little lower. Historical accuracy be danged. I really didn't want to do that boost back up and capture again maneuver. Especially what with all the technical issues I was running into. Shoots pop. But yeah, it's back to running almost completely stable like it had been. I almost think I should make every folder except the save file read only. Keep myself from messing with it. I just have that habit. I gotta mess with stuff. We returned, and I tried launching a pod after that, and the game just completely locked. And so this is after my rebuild. I had to do a development contract to get the last parts of the KW Saturn V unlocked. And so around the 60s and 70s is when a lot of heavy VTOL experimentation was going into effect. So I had a contract to test a VTOL engine and this heavy landing gear, so I thought I'd build a neat little VTOL jet, which that's actually VTOL rocket with jet engines. And just like in real life, the transition from vertical takeoff to horizontal flight is the most hazardous and treacherous part. Which, completely unrelated, but right now there's an old Ford Tri-Motor visiting an airport around me. I'm going to try to get out and go see it this weekend. And if I take any video or pictures of it, I'm going to put them up on. I'm going to make a video on and put them up on YouTube. It's a neat little. It's a 1929 Ford Tri-Motor, the first commercial airliner, first practical commercial airliner. Looks like it's made out of corrugated tin. But this was such a finicky aircraft, I knew I was never going to get it down safely. So do my patented parachute return. Which Kerbals don't have access to wind tunnels or flight simulators, so it's kind of a trade-off here. Good little bounce. And that's one thing I don't understand. I'll probably never be able to make anything fly with these VTOL engines. There are some people who can, but I just can't get center of mass to stay constant enough. So there that is. And finally, with all the flights we've had flown, we get the 5-meter experimental rocketry parts unlocked. And we take off with Kerbal 13, which I'm starting to believe after my last mission, my last series, where I had some Kerbal 13 issues, and this one, I believe number 13 might actually be cursed. Because what I didn't remember to do when I was rebuilding my game files is I forgot to add the word fairing to the pedal adapter. And so as this launches and the atmospheric dynamic pressure increases. Wait for it. There we go. Parts of the lander, because the pedal is not a fairing exempt part without the word fairing in the description, it just had my lander explode inside the fairing. Thankfully, we are prepared for such eventualities. With the escape tower. Which I'm going to make a action group for these parachutes, because trying to stage in 64-bit to hit the parachutes was a kind of a nerve-wracking experience. So yes, once again, Kerbal 13 fails to get to the moon. However, in this timeline, instead of because it's such an early launch, I just took whatever. The same crew gets to fly the same mission later. I just wanted to show this launch failure. Doing pretty decently well on money, so it was a very expensive rocket to lose, but you know, sometimes things just suck. Good chute deployment. Here, various pieces of the rocket impacting the surface. But the important thing is the crew gets rescued. Which I had been debating about removing the launch escape system, but those F1 analogs were at full throttle, and without a launch escape system, I never would have outrun them. Probably the rocket would have broken up underneath me, and the capsule would have been able to return on its own anyway, but not really a risk I was wanting to run, so that launch escape tower has earned its place for all future missions. And in our next video, these guys will actually make it to the moon. I went and right after this and edited the part so it would be Ferrum exempt. There's plenty of debris scattered about. Power down the spacecraft before recovery. The lander came down somewhere over there. But we'll catch this up in the next episode.